Frances, great to have you here. Welcome to the Australian Ballet.
Thank you, David. It's so good to be here.
Yeah, welcome to DanceX as well. A huge honor for us, but as well, unbelievable that we could work it out with our schedules, with your schedule, your busy performing schedule. I know you are just on country.
Great to be back in Nam. I too am astounded that we managed to fit this in between, we all know arts companies are making up for 2 years of being, just having their program, having their work, their jobs, their artistry stifled, and actually, we're in recovery still. It's been devastating, but what a breath of fresh air to have a program like this that shows, just how resilient and I like to think that, that art, you can't stop it. It's just, it will always be there. It's the message of the people. We are a reflection of our diverse stories and our identities that make up this country.
So let's talk about terrain and when it was created and the sections that you're bringing and sort of, give us an insight in your mind about terrain.
So terrain is a work that was created 10 years ago. It's my first full-length work for Bangarra.
Oh, wow.
And it's the inspiration for me creating this work was I wanted to give non-Indigenous people a better understanding and insight into what country meant to Indigenous people. Not only that, we come from particular areas, from the location of that country, but the historical history of land rights, native title, insight into cultural obligation to country, caring, maintenance, preservation of knowledge, and inheriting that responsibility. The spiritual aspect of what it means to go to country beyond the ancestral lands of your people, and how that grounds you and how that gives you such a empowered sense of identity. We know that for non-Indigenous people, when they go to country, they also have those experiences of fulfillment, of feeling like they are a very small part of a much bigger picture.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really healthy to have that perspective as human beings.
Yeah, of course.
So it's, it's this, I guess it's states of experience of land and country, the embodiment of it, the significance of it,
Great.
the sacredness of country, the geographical and, power of what country is. We have the most ancient country in the world. When you go out to some of these places, you see the scars of millennia etched into, into the surface of these river systems and, the flora and fauna that have had these cycles of life and survival and endurance. Australia is so rich and so old. We only know a tiny little bit of its history. Indigenous people inherit knowledge systems and cultural information that spans back generations.
Yeah.
I think we need to do more about connecting with that. We see now the changes in our environment, in our climate.
We absolutely do.
In our weather systems. And, I think we need to come together to be able to understand how to care for this for future generations.
Yeah.
And that means connecting with Indigenous people, the people who've lived on country, hearing their knowledge, you know, there's such sophistication with understanding weather patterns, systems. I think the thing is that there is a lot of information that can be shared that will help the management of environments and care for it.
So in terms of terrain, it was your first full-length work.
Yeah.
Was that daunting to create a full evening work? Were you empowered and enriched and excited?
I was empowered,
Yeah.
I was motivated, I was so ready.
Were you?
I had 2 young boys, my sons, and you know, being a parent, there are sacrifices that you make, and I had to let them know I've been given this opportunity to create a work. So I think, you know, there are those sacrifices that you make, but I was so ready and I knew that this was important. I knew I would get one shot at this, and I felt that pressure, but I also knew that that I was going to create something really special. So I wanted it to specifically be about a place, and I went to a place called, the English name for it is Lake Eyre, but for Arabana people, who are the custodians of that area, it's called Garitanda. And we engaged a cultural consultant, Uncle Reg Dodd. So going out onto the lake, and you know, this is a lake that very rarely fills up. You know, it normally sits for the majority of the year as a salt lake, and very rarely there is a cyclone that happens off the coast of Queensland, or monsoon, extreme monsoonal conditions that create this body of water that flows down through desert river systems through Queensland. It makes this 1,000-kilometre trip to arrive in this giant basin that's 20 metres below sea level. And it transforms country along the way, and this is Lake Eyre.
Wow.
You know, they have marine birds and that somehow know they have the signal to arrive at that precise time that water starts spilling into that lake, and you know, they have their own cycle of life of breeding, and you know, there's you know, the biodiversity of that area is really unique, and as well as, you know, the geographical, you know, particular geographical information of being a basin, of being 20 metres below sea level. It's one of the largest lakes in Australia, and culturally it's really significant to the Arabana and other people as well. So he shared with me, with myself and David Page, the composer, and Jacob Nash, our set designer, went out there, and it's like an immersion. We are guided by the community and by our cultural consultant and the cultural authorities of the area, who share with us information that can be used in the production and let us know the parameters of what shouldn't be touched. And you know, that's how we're guided. It's inspiring, you know, and I wanted to share Uncle Reg's knowledge, and
share your personal experience.
Yeah, that's right, and that's
as a choreographer.
Yeah, that's the final piece of the puzzle. Is you have to also draw from your own, you know, how it impacts you.
Yeah.
And your connection to the story.
Because it's a personal experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably...
It's got to be authentic.
Yeah. And I've never choreographed a step or a concept in my life. So I can imagine how personal it has to be. You know, you take that experience, but then you come back into, you have artists in front of you to realize all of these experiences, you know, of course, because you had dual experiences on country, and then you create the movement and you create the idea, and it becomes quite personal.
Yeah.
That's amazing. So I want to talk a bit about the music.
Yeah.
And how you were inspired by David's composition and David's collaboration with you. Give us a little insight into the music of Train.
I never get sick of listening to this score. It is one of the most beautiful gifts that I have been given, is to have David create this score. You know, the process was quite difficult because we'd gone out there, had this incredible experience on country. We came back to the city, and he went to his studio, I went into the studio with the dancers, and you start unpacking, you talk story, you playing with ideas, setting different taskings, and having these explorations. But this is a work that it had to be coaxed out. It had to be given the respect and the time to arrive when it was ready.
Yeah. Oh, that's a lot of the time people are rushing into things.
I had to be so patient.
You did. Did David have to be patient?
David is just a phenomenal. He's a very, very, very grounded, very cultural man. So he understood that it was going to arrive, but we all had to just let it, just give it.
Let it percolate.
The time and the space, let it percolate,
good.
And it would come. And when it came, it was phenomenal. I actually created, I was looking back when we were doing the remount, this is hilarious, I was looking back at some of the early archive footage, and there were pieces like Shields, the piece that's in DanceX with the men carrying the shield artifact. And I had done that whole piece without music, and that David would come in, look at what I was doing, have his own response to it, go back into his music studio and would compose and create to what I'd created.
Yeah.
So he was responding to it. And
which is,
when they came together, it fitted perfectly like a glove.
So interesting.
And, we just had that beautiful trust and respect for each other. And he knew, and, I can really, distinctly remember him saying, "Don't worry, sis. It'll come and it'll be really special. You need to trust me."
Yeah.
And I
and
did.
You did.
And it will, this is a piece of music that picks you up and carries you to country. And I think if you're sitting there and you're watching it, you feel that. You feel the energy. You feel, at times that there is, that you are out there, that there is a vastness. And I don't know how in music you create a sense of space and vastness and horizon, but he managed to achieve that.
Yeah.
He's a genius, yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I feel like if I create no other work, I'm just content that I had that experience.
God.
Yeah.
How beautiful.
Very special.
Yeah, great. It's such an honor, and I can't wait to see Terrain in its glory with its music and its choreographic language. So thank you so much. Great chat. Thank you, Frances.
Thanks, David.